Welcome to the second live core team broadcast, streaming to you from very early in the US here. So some of us are still, partially here, but we're ready to get started and, excited to talk to all of you. This time we're going to have live questions starting in probably 10 or so minutes. So, start tweeting. We're excited. Let's start with a round of introductions, especially for Florian, who is new to this stream.
Yeah. Hello. I'm Florian over here in Berlin, where it's noon and not that early in the day. And I'm very looking forward to this conversation about a little bit of the thinking behind a lot of the things that we were doing with this foundation. I wanted to be on the last event, but my internet disagreed and failed the moment we went live. So I'm happy to be here for the second try and hope it all holds.
Nico?
Yeah, so I'm Nico. I introduced myself before, but I didn't say, I'm going to say it right now, I'm a member of the Foundation Project Group. Last time Mark kind of prompted me and about to make sure I pointed that out. But I'm also a member of the core team and co-lead of the language team. And as of last night, I am no longer co-lead of the compiler team, but I was for a very long time. And I'm super psyched that Leslie is now taking up that banner. And I've been, really involved in this foundation planning and everything else, and super excited to see that work coming to fruition. There you have it.
Ashley?
Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm really excited to have a really in-depth conversation about editor preferences. It's going to be great. I use Vim with this highlighting. Have you? Yeah. No. It's really early and this coffee is not complete. But I'm Ashley. I'm on the core team. I've been doing a lot of work on this foundation situation, which I guess is another name for it. Yeah, and I'm very sleep dependent. I'll leave it at that.
I see, Florian, you said it's not that early, but given when you respond to my pings, like on a regular basis, I kind of suspect that this is actually quite early for you personally, if not Europe in general. Am I wrong?
Currently, yes, for the reason that due to us having to sync a lot of having to spend a lot of sync time and the evenings being better, my current work life is a little shifted towards more the afternoon towards the evening to spend the high intense time on the foundation in the evenings. But in general, I've got a rather normal sleep schedule. So coming back in January.
I'm glad to hear that, because I often send messages and I'm like, I'm sure Florian will get to this when he wakes up, and then you answer right away, and I'm like, what have I done?
So, yeah, let's get started. So before we head into live questions, which I'm not seeing any yet, so keep asking, keep tweeting. But let's start with this sort of question for each of you. So what excites you in particular about the foundation? And sort of if there's some problems you're interested in solving, or thing you want to tackle first thing, or have the foundation tackle, as the case may be. And let's start with Florian.
So what excites me the most about the foundation? A certain kind of independence in that the foundation is a part and a tool of the project to grow and work on its own and set its own workflows around all the things that were previously handled by externally, particularly by Mozilla, very greatly. And the other thing I'm enjoying a ton is the ability to collaborate with organizations. That's my huge thing that excites me.
Sorry, you kind of stole my answer.
I was just going to riff on organizations because we ended up using the word corporate persons yesterday, and we're having quite fun with it. Sorry. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right. Nico has already cursed on the broadcast, so it's been a success. Amazing. Did you call on me, Mark, for what excites me most about the foundation?
Sure.
Oh, I wasn't trying to like jump in line. Nico said that Florian took his answer though, so I'll give him some time to think. I think the thing that excites me the most about the foundation is that, I don't know, I've been doing open source for a long time at this point, which is weird because I used to say it was a short time and time passed. And sometimes it's been my job and sometimes it's been as a volunteer, but I don't know. I've been really frustrated with the general like economic and organizational model of it, and to continue to try to do the same thing and expect different results is kind of a very silly thing to do. And to a certain extent, when I was participating in open source, I feel like that's what I was doing in my attempt to avoid burnout. And so it feels really exciting and powerful and energizing to feel like we might be trying to move that needle and come up with structures that can help change that situation where like maybe, you know, burning out isn't just the natural like path, and that we can really come up with ways to like establish sustainability for both individuals and projects. So I feel like that's maybe a little heady for me at 6 a.m., but that is what really excites me because I don't know, I've many times over the last couple of years I've been like, should I keep doing this stuff? Like, is this a good idea? And sometimes it feels like the answer is no, and also don't recommend other people do this either. So I don't know. I'm excited to try and turn that page.
Nico, do you have an answer now?
Well, so I won't deny having asked myself that question, but I'm happy to say the answer is yes still, but it is tricky. But the thing I wanted to say, the answer I was going to give, which I think is similar to what Florian said, but different maybe, is that what excites me the most about Rust is collaboration, I guess about Rust and open source. And I feel like Rust has done a really good job. I mean, we have our problems, but we've done a really good job at enabling collaboration, but mostly at an individual level. And I feel like the foundation gives us a chance to take that up to an organizational level, and I'm pretty excited to see what comes out of that. And I think there's going to be like a feedback loop. Like I think if you've been listening to what we've been saying about supporting the maintainers and the mission of the foundation, the sort of goal of this organizational collaboration is to come back and support the individuals and the individual collaboration that has worked so well that it's begun to suffer problems of scale. And so I think that's a really exciting feedback loop. And I like one of the challenges that I think comes out of open source is that there's a kind of tragedy of the commons where the great part about it is it belongs to no organization, no single organization. The bad part is that means no single organization is tending to it and tending to like all of the managerial and organizational needs that come up in it. I think actually it was Ashley and Florian who first pointed out to me that like we have 300 individual contributors and 0 managers in the Rust project. And I was like, oh.
That is not a direct quote. Some of you are managers.
Yeah, it's true. It's not a direct quote. And I mean, I see myself as playing a managerial role and other things, at least at times. But like, it's true that we have a lot of people working, and that's really awesome. But it is true that like, there's a need to strengthen the structure that they're working in. And I think it's really cool. And I'm excited to see if we can do that.
I have a question there for you, Nico. The words that formed in my head in while you were talking is, do you think the foundation will bring a certain simplicity to things that were more complex before?
I hope so.
Speaking of hidden complexity in that question.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I think by making some things first class that were like not first class, like I mean, if nothing else, having like it's definitely true that having a legal entity that can sign contracts and take actions on behalf of the project will simplify a lot of things operationally. I don't think not sure if that's what you were going for, but I think that's obviously true.
Those were the things I was kind of getting at, because that's what I try to express. Like this is what it means to be in the value of independence for me, like making it easier to actually have all under a roof and these concerns under one roof together with the project, and making sure that there's it's easier to have constant conversations with the same mission and under the same roof. So for me,
I was just gonna say, with that ease though, like we're saying that adds simplicity, but like I'd potentially argue that us being independent also adds like a significant amount of complexity, because things that were like just kind of given to us before that we didn't have control to change now is potentially like under our purview, which means like the space of things to design has grown dramatically, which is exciting, but certainly is a type of complexity.
There will probably be questions we cannot sidestep as easily anymore. That's for sure. I think, right? But
that's what this whole process is about.
Not that I was
Foundation
ever
conversation.
But I had a thought about this, something that you were saying. Oh, well, what you're just saying, both of you, just kind of sparked another thing that I'm excited about in the foundation, actually, which is that I think it's opening up kind of another avenue for us to bring and promote like more leadership from within the Rust organization, different kinds of leadership. And maybe that's just on my mind after like the blog post I was just working on and so on. But I think that's going to be a really cool theme. And I think that's going to help with this problem that Ashley was raising. Like, yeah, we have new questions, but we're going to have like new venues and more leaders and more ways for people to tackle those questions. And that's going to be great.
Yeah, I think that's particularly exciting. Like, I don't know. I've always been against designing things from first principles. And one of the best ways to avoid that situation is to make sure that people who have experience doing these types of things and like have done them before are like in the room. And it's just been hard I think it's always been in the spirit of Rust to invite folks to that room, but we've just kind of lacked the overhead and the scaffolding to like make being in that room with that set of skills like pleasant. And so I think that the opportunity there is going to be really great.
I definitely agree on the not invent things from first principles design. I definitely enjoyed a lot of the things that around looking at what other foundations do and see like where does our plan like fit what others do, or consciously choosing between this standard solutions for this. Let's pick a standard solution and spend time on things where we feel we can find improvements. Like,
yeah.
I guess one question sort of that has sparked in my mind from sort of what you've talked about is sort of we've talked about how, you know, there's new problems to tackle, maybe new venues to tackle them in. But to some extent, I think one of the things we've been sort of aiming for with the foundation is that while we sort of create these new venues, the sort of inflow of information and people into the project is still going to be fairly unified. We're not going to be trying to split things apart. And I'm wondering if any of you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know, Nico, you can go for it.
I was trying to bail you out because I knew you were still working on your coffee. But if you're
Well, I'm
psyched,
sad now. I mean, I drank all the coffee in this cup, and the other coffee is like over there, and I know it's a huge mess. But no, I mean, I think that the point Mark is bringing up is really important. So I think there's like an interesting balance here to strike about how the foundation and the project potentially relate. But as it comes to like folks participating, like I don't think we want to have a sense of project volunteers and foundation volunteers. I mean, I would even go so far as to say like, I don't know, project staff versus volunteer. This is like it's Rust people, like Rust volunteers. And I think it's really critical to keep that unified.
yeah, the foundation is the project is the foundation, or we're together is what I
yeah.
No, I think I was not supposed to say those words because they can sound a little frightening, but
yeah, that's precisely where I have this model in my head of under one roof. I think it's a huge problem if those things are seen as different, and there's an artificial barrier, a barrier between the foundation people and the project people. And the thing that I enjoyed most is working in organizations where the plane doesn't matter because we're working towards the same goal, making Rust better in many different ways and with slightly different focus. And that's just because of the work you can do in certain spaces. And we're agreeing with what Ashley was mentioning, that this gives us the ability to do more kinds of work, which also makes things more complex. But I'm very much looking forward to that because it's enabling to even be able to do that kind of work.
I mean, I think when I said the foundation is the project and the project is the foundation, I think the really interesting question is what does the word project even actually mean, right? I think what a lot of us have in our heads, or at least what I think when we use that word, we are often meaning the Rust teams, the existing Rust teams, and those are not equal to the foundation in any sense. Those teams they exist, and the foundation is like there to enable them and help them work. That is its mission, or enable the people on them, I think, and support those maintainers who are members of them. But at the same time, like, you know, we've talked in the frequently asked questions about some of the structure, and we'll be going more into that in coming weeks and so on. But like, they have, we're you know, the foundation board will include a number of members from the teams, and there's representation going there, and we are kind of working all together towards the same goal, right? And I think that's pretty cool, right?
I think I kind of want to riff on this idea that you said, like, the foundation is the project is the foundation, and like that's scary. And I think one of the reasons that can be scary is just the foundation is a new entity, and it can be really weird to feel like there's a new entity that's like put into potentially a position of like power and control. And one of the things that we talked about a lot with the project group as we were thinking about the foundation and kind of how it plays into like just the whole kind of like ecosystem of Rust. And I do think ecosystem almost makes more sense than project, since there's a lot of little projects inside of Rust, is that like the foundation is a player within that ecosystem. And while it's going to be like a governance body, because that's what a foundation is, I think it's also really important to just like say out loud that we know that there's going to be a period of trust earning that has to happen. And like the no matter what we say today or, you know, in the FAQ, like the foundation is going to need to be like a part of the community, and we're going to have to see how those types of things play out. And I think that's really important, but I do think it's critical to call out that like it's not the goal of the foundation to like consume and subsume the entirety of the project so much as like be a player within that ecosystem.
But I also think there's a chance in this. So the foundation is a little bit of a blank sheet of paper currently, and I think this is what some of the unease may come just from that, because and this is why we're having this conversation and talking about our plans for what to write on that piece of paper. But there's also a lot of chances in this, because we can open up new conversations, we can open up new ways of conversations, new ways of engagement, new ways of working in our project, new ways of transforming the project, growing over the next years, ensuring that growth. So I'm super happy about starting to write on that piece of paper. So and let's hope it ends up being I'm sure that it's going to be a good story, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So along these sort of lines of writing on the piece of paper, I think, Florian, you're not quite right about the blank piece of paper. It's like graph paper or something. We have sort of structure there.
That was good, Mark. That was good.
I
also love graph paper.
Can I steal that? Can I steal the MC role and pivot to a question? There was this question that was raised in the fact of like, what was one of the hardest parts of designing the foundation? And what I was going to say was, I think the question of what to define and what to leave for the future actually is one of the more subtle and hard questions. And that's what I thought about when I heard the blank paper reference, because I think we've tried to be. First of all, we were trying to move quickly, and that poses some like constraints. But I think also just it was really important to us to leave space for the foundation to for us to explore and iterate and learn from what's working and what's not. And we didn't want to try to do everything up front. That doesn't make sense. But at the same time, to set up a structure that will guide that iteration down the path we think is going to be most successful. And I think that was a fun balancing act to try to strike.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll note, Nicos, sort of, I'm not part of the foundation group, though lately I've been doing a lot more there.
You basically are, Mark. I don't think you should say that you're. I mean, what even is a team? You're part of it.
The question, yeah.
Mark is like, stop talking.
The thing I was going to bring up is that one of the reasons we want to provide this initial structure and framework for the foundation, and to some extent more broadly these interactions with the teams and so forth, is to design intentionally, not just for the next year of the foundation, but also for the next 10 years or 20 years, so that we can grow into that shape and fill that structure without having to break new ground or whatever every year as we grow as a project and community.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I found really the hardest part in this process was also staying focused on having all the important conversations on what is the goal of this, instead of we're just setting up a legal structure, thinking we had a lot of conversations around what are the goals, what are things we probably better not do, what have we seen fail, especially in our own experiences. A lot of the people in the foundation working group have done this before in other communities. I've been part of a Ruby nonprofit over here in Berlin, or actually still am. So taking all those experiences and critically investigate on what can we do to make this something for 2020 and not for 2011 or something like that, was an enjoyable path, but it was hard.
You are thinking on a really big time scale.
The language for the next 40 years, is it? Rust.
I heard 2011, and that's a really long time. But I hope Rust is still in use in 20,000 years from now. But,
empowering people to write stable and future-proof software.
I think that's a really good point, though. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to dodge the question for a second and talk about like future proofing, because as a group of engineers here, we all want to write code that will be like maintainable and changeable, and like, but we also all know that that's like kind of a lie. Like you can't really like, when you write software, you're like, oh, this is going to be like a really good abstraction for like the next like year, and like you are cursing yourself like within 2 days about like the decisions that you've made. So like the words that I've been saying a lot through this process, which I'm sure these other three are like so sick of hearing me say, is like systems of affordances. So like yeah, there we go. Nico's laughing at me. Perfect. One of the things I think that we like don't pay as much attention to that I wish we did is like kind of like the way we set up incentives that have like these like chronic effects over long periods of time. And they are like by far the hardest things to see, but they are the things that over long periods of time really shape like what your organization and group can do. And I think as an open source project, Rust actually got a lot of these incentives right. And so when I think about like designing the foundation, like there's bylaws. I expect the bylaws to change, even though like every foundation is like afraid of having to change their bylaws like so much. They're going to change. I actually think the more agile we can be about changing those, the better. Not to use, people are grumpy about agile, right? I don't know. I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, I just meant flexible. But coming up with like really understanding what the like key vision and values are like is kind of what sets up those like affordances and incentives that like drives things forward. So that's been something I've been like really excited about. I'm not going to answer what the hardest part is until Mark really forces me to, which is fine.
I think I'll note that it was me who injected that whole thing, and not poor Mark was like, don't. But I think Florian's answer gets at that, right? Like there was definitely, I will confess on my part, a desire to like, or at least a tendency, let's say, sometimes to just drop in at the lowest level. And we've all seen that whenever you're doing design, that can happen, right? You're just like, here's how the code should look. Instead of dialing back or whatever it is, here's how the bylaws should look. Instead of dialing back to be sort of, what are the big picture, what is the goal, not just how kind of majority do you need to make a decision, but like, what are they trying to decide and why? And that is really useful to have someone remind you to pull back and look at that.
It's a process of actually like, what do we push off? Because we've already also had the conversation of can we as this small group decide certain things that should be decided later? So the conversation of, we actually think that should be decided for that should be a decision for the people doing the work later, and implementing that has been constant thing. And like separating things into goal setting, and also, oh no, this would be a detailed decision where we would actually take that away from the person that would actually do that later, and where we don't think it's good to make this decision now. So, and that is that has been an effort to separate these things strongly. I enjoyed that effort a lot, because it also means thinking about how the organization may work later.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been sort of increasingly involved, as Ashley will tell me. I've always been involved, but it's been in the last like 3 weeks or so. But as sort of we've been getting that involvement ramping up, sort of from just the project group to a wider set of folks on the core team, it's been really interesting to see sort of this transition, I think, from sort of diving into ideas and sort of working out all of these sort of details that we need for the foundation to even like exist, to sort of shifting a little bit to these sort of broader ideas of like, why do we exist, or sort of why, what goals are we trying to solve, or what problems can we tackle, and to some extent like how we can tackle those problems, to design in the sort of, as Ashley always says, systems of affordances to be able to tackle those problems right from the sort of start of the foundation.
Nico, what was that?
It was a little over the top. No,
Oh my God.
I'm into systems of affordances. It's good. I have heard the words a lot lately, but they're important words.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. Before we move on to other questions, because we actually have some questions in the comments, which is awesome. The thing that I want to say about the hardest part of this is to kind of like pull out of the heady answers and just go, to a certain extent, when we announced that we were going to do this in August, right? Like, basically what we were proposing is that as a hobby, we were going to speed run starting a new company. That's what we said that we were going to do. And if I think about what's the hardest part of it, it's just the thing that we did was the hardest part. Like the idea that we thought that we could pull that off at all. I'll say like every morning I wake up and kind of go like, oh shit, what if we like don't do this? Like, what if this like doesn't happen? And like the difference between this happening and it not happening is like me doing stuff today. And like every day there is stuff that if I don't do it, like this doesn't happen. That was the hardest part. And it's not over yet. We're still going. So yeah, I think my friend Luis Villa, when we announced the FAQ on Twitter, he was like, "We're watching like a 501c6 get made live." I'm just like, yeah, like most people don't like endeavor to try and do this in like a couple months. Very bold choice.
This one thing
First of all, I want to apologize. I decided I was going way too far with my systems of affordances jokes, but I'm all into it. But secondly, I think you nailed it with that. By the way, that is totally true.
And on the speedrun figure, it's also not an any percent speedrun. I want to share one thing talking about that. I got a couple of feedback sessions with some people actually outside of the Rust community before we started this endeavor or at the beginning. And one quote that stuck out to me from someone was, the thing I always find interesting when seeing the Rust project from the outside is that you take theory, like, as you say, the heady stuff, and you put it into action. Like you pick what you want and then you put it into, then you actually build it. And that was, I think that's the thing that has connected me to this process. A lot of, this is actually an idea I had in my head with all of my experience and whatever, but what can we do out of it? Like, how can we actually make that thing happening? And yeah, so.
Yeah. And it's exhilarating to make it happen, but it's also like terrifying. I've definitely just been very nervous, but I am excited. It feels like it's actually happening.
Okay.
Should
so
we
let's see.
address the question? Yeah.
We can address the question.
What was the question?
Will there be changes in teams and community projects structurally? I just totally took your job, Mark. I'm the worst. Oh, you can read it again if you want.
No, it's good. So I guess, I don't know, are we splitting the question apart? I guess we can just answer it as a whole. I don't know. Let's go with Florian, since you're most awake of any of us. You can take a stab at the question.
I'll not split the question. No. I think one thing that sets the Rust project apart, and that's also feedback I got a lot, is that the Rust project has always, and that's particularly the reason why I am in the Rust project, always seen things like community interaction and all the things you need to do around the code as a core function of its project. You can see that in our yearly surveying, in that we have a community team from the beginning, and that a lot of the teams also, it's not just the community team, that a lot of the teams are very community minded and are taking community feedback. I said a lot, all of them, sorry, all of them. And we have substantial projects outside of the project, and outside, like the boundary is floating there. Some people, for example, are individually part of the Rust project, but they do also have something on the side. that where they're running a meetup or something like that. And I think that system works well. And it would be, we will make that better, I'm sure. And we'll find ways to make that better in the next years. But I think it's a strong point. So I'd be very cautious with choices that don't come out of this system already. So long story short, changes always happen, but not out of this conversation, I have the feeling.
Nico?
You just stole my answer. The thing I was going to say is, yes, there will be changes in teams and community projects, but not directly as a result of creating the foundation. Because the project is always evolving, and we are going to make changes because we're going to do things better. But creating the foundation itself is not like we're also adjusting a bunch of team changes at the same time. I said directly because I think that the foundation is going to have unforeseen and wonderful impacts over time.
I was about to jump in and say that, which is I do think that this foundation conversation, and the conversation doesn't stop once the foundation gets kicked off, right? It will continue to be a dialogue. What I am excited about is, I don't know, Nico also is probably irritated with me saying I'm so excited about the opportunity to look at data and stuff, because I am, but okay, I'll have to keep a list of which ones Nico likes. But our series of teams and projects is just huge, and I don't think we have great visibility into it. And so the project is always growing and changing, but I mean, I think we might agree that it doesn't grow and change quickly, maybe is not the right word, but we're not as efficient about growing and changing based on our changing needs as we might want to be. And I see the foundation as an opportunity to get better at that, and to be able to, again, bring support and resources into thinking about how we do those types of things. So yeah, no, the foundation isn't going to be we declare that there is a space communism team now. Just a suggestion, just throwing that one out there. But if the foundation said that, everyone would be no, foundation, that's not your job. But I think there's an opportunity to go man, we have so many space communism initiatives. It would be really great if we could create some scaffolding around that portion of the project, and be able to support it. That might be more of the shape that we would see that happen in. Anyways, I feel folks are now maybe excited about this in the chat. That's cool. Completely random idea, has nothing to do with anything, I promise.
There's also an effect to be aware of. Well, that was particularly the reason why I've actively searched for people from pretty much outside, even outside of the community, or who are a little bit more distant from for getting feedback, that being in the thick of it for now roughly 5 years means that you see a lot of the problems very dominantly, and people from the outside can give you feedback on the things that work. And seeing that, particularly that people highlight, the interaction between the project and the community, that has a vibe to it, particularly that has a vibe that radiates, also points to, well, this vibe must continue to exist. And it's a good thing, and it's a strong point. So my thinking has turned a lot towards how can we make this increase and ride that wave, essentially.
Yeah, so I think we've talked sort of a little bit about how the foundation is going to interact with the community, but sort of this question, I think, brings us sort of closer to that. And I'm wondering, Florian, if you want to talk a little bit about sort of if there's, we said that there's probably structural changes that are going to happen just as a result of Rust's growth, not really Foundation directly. But I think people are probably also interested in this question of like, well, what is the Foundation, going to change in the community, or maybe, it's nothing, or sort of that general area.
So what is going to change is a good question for something that doesn't exist yet. It's going to exist. It will be. I still see it as it will be an additional component to the project to make to enable new kinds of interactions, and for example, work together with teams like the community team to come up with actions and programs and support them. So this will always be, I don't even want to say joint effort. This will be an effort under the same roof, with new approaches that we can take that weren't, I don't want to say possible before, that weren't as easy before. We have had community interaction. We had community grant programs and all of these as the project all the time. And the Foundation will be, and we had that together with partners always. And the Foundation will be will help us will help us making programs happen.
What just happened there? Some stuff.
I know, I'm sorry. I learned a new thing about StreamYard by accident in the middle of Florian's answer, which is I can take questions from the comments, and if I accidentally click them, they will just show up on the screen, which is like really useful. This is a very complicated way of just saying, there's a new question. I'm sorry, Florian. Your answer
No
was
problem.
Ashley, do you want to do that again or something? Because I actually did not. Okay. Ooh.
It's kind of a big one, but I think it's a great question. We have 18 minutes left in this stream, and so how we answer a question like this in 18 minutes will be hard, but I'm excited to address it.
Yeah, I guess let's start with this sort of how teams and Foundation will be in sync. I think so. I guess one of the things we can talk about there is this idea of sort of relationships and sort of how the teams will be able to, or willing to talk to people on the Foundation and vice versa. Nico, do you want to take us off there?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mentioned already that the project has some representatives and things that'll be part of the Foundation, but I think the question of how teams will talk to the Foundation, I mean, the way we've been thinking of it is mostly that to start, the simplest answer is if teams have ideas, for what they would like to see done, they should take them to the core team. And the core team has representatives on the Foundation board that can kind of think about those ideas and bring them up. And that's kind of a natural flow. And the nice thing about that information is that it may be that the team has an idea of something they want to do. You may not actually need to, it may not actually require the Foundation, right? Or maybe there's another way to go about it that someone on the core team has an idea. And so we kind of wanted to keep that flow going up through the existing teams and then to the Foundation, and not so much like everybody's talking to everybody and it gets a little overwhelming. But I think that's the primary flow we have in mind for that. Although I imagine there will be other channels that arise over time.
Well, I was going to say, I don't disagree with you, Nico, but I might give a different priority to how I answer.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, so I do think one of the ways that the project and the teams will interact with the Foundation is proposing initiatives. But I think one of the critical first things to say is that the teams and the Foundation are not entirely separate at all. The Foundation board is going to have, oh my gosh, sorry, my dog just woke up. There he goes. He feels strongly about this. The Foundation and the project are one. God damn it. He just woke up and is doing this now. Anyways, the the foundation board has representatives from the project on it. And so the way that they will stay in sync and communicate is that there are people there to make sure, like people who will be in both rooms, who will be able to have shared context across those different organizational bodies. So it's not like there's two black boxes and we need to like create some sort of channel. Yes, one of the key directors for the project on the board will be my dog. He has some serious collaboration issues, though, that are concerning. But as we talk about like an overseeing structure, like I definitely like this second word you use, which is meld. I definitely think that it's more that the foundation extension is the wrong word, but it's part of one large organization, not two separate ones that are kind of chatting. And so, of course, with my dog stopping barking, I will let other folks talk now. Gosh.
Yeah, that's there's one part of that I want to address is like the part overseeing. The foundation will not. I don't see them as like overseeing the project, but again, this thinking of will be a resource to the project, an additional thing that we plug on and participate in the collaborative structure that the Rust project has, but be responsible for tasks that we didn't have before. And the Rust project already has a strong tasking of teams. So for example, things that the release team doesn't sign off on, all of the other teams can complain as much as they want to. If the release team says this is not of sufficient high quality, it doesn't get too stable. And in that level, the foundation will also play some of these critical roles where it has to oversee, for example, it will definitely oversee a budget because that's what part of that structure is there for. So that will be the thing that it brings, but also, and this is one thing that I'm very happy about in the Rust project, is that we have a lot of upstanding, self-confident teams. And that is a good way on how these teams can, because they're already self-confident, can interact with the new part that we plug on. And the foundation in that case will be part of this, system of affordances, groups of self-confident teams, whatever you may want to have. And I think this is like how we should how we need to approach this as like this is a chance. These are people that want to do that particular piece of work, and they have their needs, the things they can bring, and the resources they can add to the project. So the melding is, I think, that's the I'll pick the meld from that question.
Yeah, I do think. So maybe one thing that I might touch on is that sort of we've talked about this melding, but I think a critical element here is that the foundation, I don't know sort of how you see melding exactly, but there's not going to be like a foundation person sitting on every team or anything like that. It's sort of melding in the org chart sense, not in the like team people sense. I don't know.
I think that makes sense. This metal smithing situation is like extremely on brand, though, just like for Rust stuff. So we should come up with more metaphors here around that.
One thing we've toyed around with, but I found it a helpful way of thinking about things, even though it's not exactly right, is sort of the foundation as another team. I don't think they are exactly a team, but I think there is like because I know you're not going to love it, but I do think there are things that are kind of in the domain of decisions that they make, and they cooperate with the other teams in that sense of a player in the milieu. But
I was going to say, I don't think it's fair to say that I don't like that, Nico, because I think that I pitched that idea yesterday to you.
If you like it, even better. You just made it.
The reason I made it face is that, like, in one spirit, it's absolutely true, and then in another spirit, it's not. Which is just the foundation is another team, but it's also accepting all legal and financial liability for the entire organization, which is like a little different, like just
a particularly prominent role.
Different. So like that's kind of like worth calling out. And so I guess to a certain extent, like I really think the spirit of it is that they will meld, but like if there's a team that wants to like do crimes, like the foundation is gonna probably oversee that. So like maybe not so much with the doing crimes bit, and like, you know, if you're going to try and do something that might potentially like financially bankrupt the organization, like I think that's where you'll start seeing stuff step in. But like otherwise, there's like such a strong culture of delegation within the Rust organization. Like, I don't know, I've sat on foundation boards before. They don't want to be like, you know, deciding what the new cargo command is. Like that's not, like we don't, there's no worry there that like they're going to be supervising something like that.
But I think that like what Florian said about the release team, for example, right? Like that I agree the foundation has a special role, but I also think it's not unique to the foundation that the teams have sort of checks and balances amongst each other and some amount of authority over one another, right? And that's kind of cool and makes sense.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at. People always see like this kind of resource allocation and budgeting as a bad thing, which will certainly be something that the foundation will be part of. But I actually like that. That's a core part of, for example, what I'm trying to teach conferences, that their budgeting is very important and that their budgeting in the end says what they will be able to do. The reason why a lot of the conferences in the Rust world are able to, like, it's common that our conferences pay speakers, which is a huge debate in other communities, and ours it isn't, for the reason that a lot of the conferences, and we have already have good ties that these conversations happen, that conferences talk about, by the way, the first thing you need to have is budget and need to be clear about money. And the reason why I'm pulling that experience in that strongly is because while there's a lot of projects in the open source space that don't think a lot about money, conferences actually do, because otherwise they're breaking bank very hard. And that might have impact. And this is why I'm talking to a lot of these people, because that might have impact to volunteer organizers if they didn't make their budget right. But you can make a lot of things happening with careful planning, and this is the role that I see there, and of making sure that we use our resources effectively because they fit in. They will always be in some way be finite.
Well, I mean, I would argue though, like you're right that the economics of a conference are like really obvious and like you can quickly like break bank very easily, to use your words. But I think that's true of building software also. Like we're just like breaking bank in like way more insidious ways. Yes, I'm still going off about the economics of open source. I feel like Mark is rolling his eyes at me, but yes, I am. And I think that that's really important. And so having a foundation means that instead of like implicitly like participating in this kind of open source economy, we can start trying to like actively participate in it and like be a lot more deliberate about that stuff, which I think is really important.
Yeah.
We do have, I mean, I love this topic and go off forever, but we have a question from the comments that I think might be cool to address. Does anyone mind if I pop it up on the screen? I won't read it this time, Mark. All right, let's see. Oh, that's
interesting. Okay, it's different this time. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't like cover you all up. Sorry about that.
Okay, so let's see. Any new or more complete learning resources for Rust? So actually, this is something we talked about quite a bit sort of before the stream started, sort of on this idea of sort of providing educational programs. So I'm wondering, Ashley, if you want to kick that off.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so I do not think it would be the scope of the foundation to necessarily declare that there is a set of learning resources that should exist and then like generate them on their own. This kind of goes back to like there's not a difference from the foundation and the project, but I do know that the project has always like really cared about learning resources, but we have kind of sometimes struggled with those because creating really good learning resources can often take a lot of resources and support. And so I do think that the foundation would be like very eager to help support maintainers create those. And in particular, it's interesting here because when we talk about learning, there's so many different dimensions of what learning can possibly mean within the Rust project and ecosystem. Like learning could be like, how do I learn Rust? And that's kind of the first kind of sense of it. But there's also like, how do I learn to contribute to Rust? How do I learn how to run a Rust conference? How do I learn how to advocate for my company to give me open source time to work on Rust? There's so many different levels of learning there. And I am excited to kind of infuse this kind of area with some resources because I think that there's a lot of really neat opportunity for the Rust project to start generating some of those resources. So I guess there's like a yes answer in here. But again, with that sense of mediation where like the foundation isn't like gonna write a book. The foundation's gonna help the project write one.
Yeah, so one thing that popped up in my head when you were like covering all those subjects is these are a lot of high context things where, for example, we have the compiler dev guide and how you hack on the compiler. It's a book. And this can only be written by people that have deep knowledge of the compiler, how it works, how the build process works, and what the flaws are currently. So it would be very hard for just saying say we hire a person who does this. This is just not possible because you won't find a person that has all these contexts and has all these knowledges. And that comes back to the idea of supporting maintainers. How can we make sure that maintainers can work on these resources, especially as we have a lot of people that are very eager to write these kind of things and there's a culture of it. But for example, I have never learned technical writing, or I had like a weekend seminar on technical writing before I wrote my master's thesis. There's still always people that ask me, like, could you write this down? I'm like, this is a hard thing for me. And I think improving the situation where people think about, do I want to write a book on this? Oh, no. Making this, do I want to write a book about it? Yes, I can do that. And I have support for that. I know how it works and there's help for this. I think that will improve that situation and organizing these kind of things. Like, I think that that was one of the feedbacks that I also got is like, there's a lot of things around and there's so much produced every day that organization of this is becoming an effort, like the constant of organization. And these are my rough thoughts when I hear that question about like especially more complete. What is complete? Is complete you can find them all? I don't know.
I don't know if we want to go to another question or stay on this because I could go either way, but I have some thoughts, but they're not super long.
I think we should stay on this.
So,
all right, we should stay on this, but everybody's asking questions at the last minute, so I feel like we need to stay on and like agree because someone actually used our hashtag, and I want to thank them for doing so.
Gotta do that. I'll stay this down a little longer. I was going to say two things about learning resources. The first one is like about the Rusty Dev Guide that Florian was mentioning, an organization. One of the really interesting things we tried to do there was having sort of people who know that area of the compiler well get sort of interviewed by other people who are going to work on the Rusty Dev Guide, and we would record that interview or do it like over text so that the interview itself is a resource that you can learn from immediately, and then it provides the raw material that people who want to learn can use to like write the text. And that, but making that kind of thing happen is a lot of organizational work. You have to like schedule it. You've got to find the people who are excited, and really you need to edit the content that's coming out of it too. And that might be a place where like there might be a role for the foundation to help enable that organizational work. And I think it's super exciting, and I love that idea because it just it just helps everybody in so many different ways. But the other thing I would say is that I want to see some of that learning going the other way. I've mentioned this a few times, but I think it's pretty exciting from wearing my Lang team hat to think about learning from people who teach Rust And that's an example where, again, there's sort of organizational relationships and organization needed to bring that knowledge in. But I'd like a much more detailed look at what are the kinds of things that people find really hard to learn and how can we address them. And I get that by doing one-on-one mentoring from time to time, but there are people who do that all the time, and they have probably a much better picture. Not to mention like developing pedagogy, all that, so forth.
I have to like be on air enthusiastically like supporting that idea. I think bringing teachers into the language design room is like super useful. And I advocated for this when I was an invited guest on TC39. But I think particularly for a language like Rust, which has this kind of like notorious learning curve. I mean, the other nice thing about having a like teachers committee or something is that as someone who used to be a teacher, we don't have a culture of like rewarding and like lifting teachers up into leadership positions and like saying your experience is important, so important that we think it is critical to like elevate your position in like this like one of the most important and core conversations in like a programming language. I think is super useful. There's only so many ways to say thank you, but like saying thank you by like actually empowering people to participate, I think is like, I don't know. I feel like it's right on tone for Rust, and it's just something I wish I saw more in the world. So
I can definitely agree. Teaching Rust myself on, for example, workshops, one of the things is that there's not many places where you can exchange with other Rust teachers on what is hard for you, what is hard for me. There's some things that are really, really hard for me to explain in Rust, and then I talk to someone else, and they're like, "I got the 5-minute explanation here. This is how I do it," and then it sticks. And so that will. I'm trying to work around the word multiplier here, making sure that this knowledge travels will improve that situation a lot.
Well, I was going to say you missed it in the last broadcast, but Nico absolutely used the word multiplier, and then I think we went into like 10x nonsense. So it's cool.
Be a fire.
10x teachers. 10x teachers.
What? Teachers are already 10x. Like that's what a teacher is. That 10x is implied.
I'm telling you, it's 10 to the x. That's what we're going for. Okay.
So thanks for all the teachers currently working in this situation.
Shout out to teachers. So we got a question on the hashtag, and I know we're a little over time, but it is a question that I actually haven't heard anybody ask us yet, and it gives us an opportunity to talk about an aspect of the foundation I've wanted to talk about. It's really long, which means I think if I put it on the screen, it's gonna like mask. Let's see.
It's not gonna mask us, actually. Go ahead, do it.
Okay, that actually wasn't too bad. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to intro the question.
Sure. Yeah. So Serde has been sort of under-maintained for a while. While folks are free to fork it without official backing, forking might just make matters worse. Any thoughts on that? So actually, you clearly have thoughts.
Well, I always have thoughts. It's true. So the thing I want to say is I don't want to give any sort of definitive or non-definitive answer about the maintenance status of Serde. But what I can call out is I have Rust crates that have extremely questionable maintenance, and we can use those to talk about it instead of potentially calling out on Serde. So we can talk about Ashley's crates and how completely under-maintained they are. And I think what this talks about is, so a thing we haven't said about the Rust Foundation is that the Rust Foundation is going to kind of have the Rust project, and the Rust project contains multitudes. And one of those multitudes is Crates.io and Cargo. And I love package management. I'm going to retire and become a UPS driver probably. Like, one of the key decisions with releasing Rust was that we're going to have a first-class package manager, and that what a first-class package manager really means is that your ecosystem of packages is also a first-class feature of the language, which means if you're not trying to figure out how to better support your ecosystem authors and like focusing not just on the project sustainability, but like understanding that the ecosystem sustainability is part of your project sustainability. Like if you're not doing that, you're making a huge mistake. So for the very first, like when we open the doors to the not physical foundation in January, this will not be fully established, but I 100% believe that being able to focus on supporting ecosystem authors here in the foundation is going to be a really critical thing. There's some models out there that exist. Like one of the things that I think would be a huge mistake and completely not in the spirit of Rust would be to have our ecosystem packages have to compete with the Rust like language itself for resources. That is not an alignment of incentives that I am interested in, and I don't want that to happen because these things work together. They don't work without the other. And so I think that we need to create an affordance of supporting these things that's aligned. How you pull this off is always very interesting, I think. And we want to be able to maintain, obviously, the independence of ecosystem authors and things like that. But it's something I'm really excited to kind of work with the foundation to figure out how to design, just because I think it's really important. And the last thing I'll say is here it says you're free to fork it, but that just might make matters worse. Yeah, I talked about space communism, but earlier, but like, yes, you can always fork, and forking is not always this like huge evil thing that I think a lot of people talk about, but it's always been the vibe of Rust, at least in my opinion, that in situations where we can work together, we would prefer to work together. And it just turns out that sometimes working together, it takes a lot of effort. Like I know I have some crates, for example, where they are under-maintained and there's folks who want to help. And it actually takes a lot of work to try and set up a system where folks can work to help together. And it's also that type of support that I could imagine the foundation could help offer maintainers. But I think there's a lot of stuff here, but just to say like, yes, like this is a key thing, at least top of my mind.
So I'll pick up the ball and talk about my own crates as well, because I actually own a crate that is the 7th fork, where someone dropped out of maintenance, and it's in the ecosystem, so it had to be forward ported to new things until finally in 2018 that whole thing cooled down and it was possible to write stable crates. In any case, and I've tried to research ways on how this project evolution goes and how the handover goes, and found that there's not a lot of structure in open source project currently, and not a lot of public writing or support writing around how do you evolve a project up onto yourself leaving the project. There's a lot of writing on how do you enter open source. There's not a lot of writing on how you evolve and how you, for example, move personally out of it. And one of the big problems why I'm currently not handing over maintainership is for the reason that I don't want the next person to fall into the same trap. And that's my main fear, is like, will I just be out and the next person just being the person that does not have enough time for this grade? So there's a lot of subtlety around this issue, but I also think there's a lot of opportunity to fix that. And there have been a number of studies recently that exactly talk to what the exact problem there is. And project reference are actually one of the big problems. These are things that currently people basically have to solve by themselves without a lot of reference to be had. So also, again, without talking about any specific things, we're also seeing this within the Rust project a little, in where I think talking about support structures. How do we support people in their whole travel through the Rust project, and help them making sure that, for example, their components stay maintained when they move out, and that there's a conscious process around all of these things, and that will both give the project resilience and people safety.
Yeah, shout out to Emily Dunham's blog post that I reread yesterday and was like, man, this is such a good post about consciously stepping back from things.
I was gonna say, you gotta say what it is. Maybe I'll try and post it up on the screen because it is amazing.
I remember the name is the problem, so yeah, if you can find it, that'd be awesome. But I have just one thing to add, which is, I think you guys pretty much nailed it, but I wanted to add that this is a good example, I think, of something that we did not try to solve now, but that we wanted to create. We totally think is in scope, and we want to have a structure that is able to address it. But there's no way we could have done it up front, right? And some of the things that Ashley was talking about supporting maintainers, and we definitely think the foundation has a role there, but it's going to be up to the foundation and the project, to work together and figure out what that is, and the best way to do that is.
Okay, so let's close out.
Wait, I just wanted to quickly say, this is the blog post, Emily Dunham. The title is Thoughts on Retiring from a Team. I would say this is like one of the healthiest open source perspectives I have read in a while. It's from 2018 and it's like just as relevant today. So I think anybody who's tuning in, give it a read. Shout out to E. Dunham.
Yeah,
She's
totally.
great. All right, I'm done interrupting. I'm sorry.
Okay. So to close this out, since we're a little over time already, and probably some of us need to get started with our day, which is sort of awkward, but it's only been an hour. Let's see. Okay, so what does success look like for the foundation?
Joyful, happy maintainers. That's my answer.
You need to say that with more enthusiasm, Nico.
Joyful, happy maintainers. I don't know what that
Okay, someone is going to remix that into, you're going to get auto-tuned. I'm excited for it, honestly.
Going to be on one of the artist sets in one of the conferences.
Man, the JavaScript conferences would always take sound bites from my conference talks and put them into songs, but not tell me. So it'd be like a surprise, when the conference kicks off. Anyways.
So for me, success of the Rust Foundation would actually look like that at some point in the near to mid future, people will be able to see our practices, check them, and adopt them. As much as we're adopting other practices, the Rust project has always adopted a lot of practices from our background. And for me, a successful foundation and the checking point for this is successful is other projects looking at what we do, taking that and putting it into their own structures, not carbon copy, but be like, this is good. I really want that. I think this is a good thing. And that's for me, I think the most approachable way to check is this successful.
Yeah, classically, I feel like I'm maybe too on theme, but one of the things that I'm particularly excited about is I want there to be a future where people who are interested in contributing to open source end up wanting to contribute to the Rust project in particular, because being a contributor is potentially a career. It's so well resourced. It's why you might pick one airline over another, which is just the Rust project, being a contributor to there is just it's nice. I want it to feel really good. And I think that to a certain extent, we kind of already have that. I mean, there's a lot of understanding that the attitude that our leaders and our maintainers have is really positive. But I see so much more room for growth there. And So yeah, I mean, this is the just very long version of Nico's soon-to-be auto-tuned response about happy, joyful maintainers, but like also, yes, happy, joyful maintainers in a way that like people want to be doing it. I forget exactly what it was. This is like a quote, me quoting Florian, quoting Nadia Engbal, but the idea that most maintainers maintain their open source out of guilt. Like, I know I said this in the last stream too, but like, I feel this so hard. I talked about my unmaintained crates. It's like a constant source of anxiety. I guess I've said this a lot. I have an anxiety problem. Like, I want there to be a different future there. And I think that the Rust Foundation gets to be a player in building that. And so the closer we get to that future, like, the more it feels like success to me.
Yeah, that all sounds great to me. Anyway, I guess I don't know, how are we closing this out officially? We don't have like a next session, so I can't reference anything. I guess you can, Ashley. Can we get the like FAQ link on the screen so that people can read more background information?
Some like closing out music. Cue up the final countdown or whatever.
The final countdown is not the closing up music. The final countdown is actually the video that needs to be posted 5 minutes before the community team meeting.
I was explaining this to Nico the other day that we used to do that before every community team meeting. We'd do a little countdown and everyone would post not just the final countdown, but like weird covers of the final. I feel like I learned, like we solved that song, like all the different possible permutations of presenting the final countdown. That's a good thing. So, I mean, I guess we can say a couple things about what's coming in the future, right? My dog. It's like, I'm like, I will say something meaningful now. And Mateo is like, no, you won't, or I'll make it difficult. So we have at least maybe a few blog posts that we're going to come out with next week. And then we kind of hit this gulf of holiday season, but we're going to kick off 2021 and we're going to be right back on this conversation with a bunch of announcements and more details. So we'll be kind of closing things out with blog posts in the upcoming week and then get ready in January. I will say that with at least the one blog post, we will be announcing a survey to ask you all, like, do you like this format? Was this fun for you? So you all were so great about answering the temperature survey. And so if you are watching and are excited, or maybe not excited, to take another survey, we'd love to hear what you thought about the activities that we've done this week so that we can figure out ways to make them better.
Perfect closing words, so.
All right.
Thank you all for watching. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, look, the sun did rise.
Yeah, it did. There was a sunrise. Yes.
I was so focused on what we were saying, I missed the beauty of nature.
You can rewatch and see it.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.